Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft 365 Copilot webinar hosted by XenTegra. I am super excited and have been waiting for weeks to cover this topic because I know as a business owner and as a consumer and a user of technology, and hopefully somebody who lets it add value to what I do on a daily basis, that Copilot, generative AI, is something that is a very, very applicable, important topic for all of us. So today we're going to talk about beyond the hype, real world readiness for Microsoft 365 Copilot AI. I'm going to throw the word generative AI in front of that, and it'll make sense here in a little bit as I talk more about the difference. If you think you're ready for Copilot, think again. Nobody is, but everybody knows they need to be. They need to be exploring it. They need to figure out where it's going to help their organization, individuals, their customer base. Just extremely powerful opportunity to take this to the next level. You guys are hearing all the buzz. You hear all the conversations going on out there. There have been things like cryptocurrency. There have been things like digital workflows that, they never really got to where they were supposed to get to. They never had the impact of VDI. I mean, heck, if you know me, my organization, we've been talking about VDI for 20 years now. Is this the year of VDI? I don't know. I think it's the decade of VDI, but is it the year of VDI? Probably not. That's a constant evolution. The thing about Copilot is the generative AI piece is coming, and it's coming, and we all have to get in front of it and continue to evaluate our knowledge and keep up, because it's going to keep changing before us. Today's panelists, myself, Andy Whiteside, president, founder of XenTegra. We are I would say we're an end user compute focused company, and we are, but we do so much more these days. Today's conversation around AI as it relates to the M365 stack, certainly end user compute. We leverage partners when we need to, and in cases of Microsoft M365 and Copilot, we absolutely need to. So we have Jody Elkins on, the president of XenTegra US here in Americas. And we have Josh, and I practiced several times, Pusateri. Sorry, I got it right after a couple seconds there. Josh is a modern workspace solutions architect for XenTegra. And I'll just use Josh's title real quick there. That is where we're at. Modern workplace, which is comprised of modern workspaces, things like M365, tools to help with that, like Copilot. We're in a world where end user compute just isn't it anymore. It is a modern digital transformation that's happening, continues to happen nonstop. Maybe I didn't share my screen. I probably didn't. So Josh is with us representing the Microsoft Copilot piece of modern workplace and that part of a digital workspace as part of a greater digital transformation story. And digital transformation is happening, will be happening, will continue to happen. And AI, and specifically generative AI, is really going to play a large role in that. Organizations of all sizes. Who is XenTegra? This is our portfolio of companies. The XenTegra nearshore, XenTegra, the mothership, LLC, that focuses here in the U.S. on mid-market commercial and enterprise customers. We have our nearshore company out of Canada, so XenTegra Canada. We have XenTegra India, which focuses on offshore activities as well as business within India. Everything we talk about today is applicable on every continent in the world, not just limited to here in the U.S. Our SLED-fed business, XenTegra Gov, which is our minority-owned business focused on state and local government, education, as well as federal government. XenTegra One, which handles our what we call SMB customers 500 employees and less. We spun that off specifically because we know there's probably people on this call today that need specialized attention, and it doesn't necessarily, one size does not fit all. Doesn't in the Copilot world, doesn't in any of the Microsoft technologies, to be frank with you. So we spun off a special group just to handle that. And then, of course, XenTegra Services, that's our professional services, as well as our managed service team. Managed service in our world includes our support contracts. If you're working with an organization like a Microsoft, like a Citrix, like a VMware, like a Nutanix, and you would like some flavor of support beyond the default support, or even if you have a premier support contract with those guys, if you're looking for an organization to provide you a minimal set of insurance where you have somebody to work with, that you pick up the phone and you call them and you get a set of guys all the time. They know who you are. They know what to expect. They're not asking you, is the thing turned on and off and plugged in. Let's talk about adding something like that too. So technical support, managed services, and of course, hosting solutions that go along with all those things that make up the XenTegra stack. I screwed up. There was a slide I was supposed to add. I got busy posting a podcast earlier, distracted. And the slide I did not add is one more company that's in this mix, and that is the XenTegra nonprofit. It's called Computers for Community. If you're on this call and you're a nonprofit that we invited to this, I'm glad you're here. Everything we talk about today is going to be applicable to you and probably has more impact maybe for you than anybody else. We know budgets are limited there. We know tools like generative AI are going to be massively important. So if you're on from the XenTegra nonprofit side, Computers for Community, glad to have you. Everything we do in the XenTegra world applies to you as well. General overview of us, we're a value-added reseller of technologies we believe in. Most importantly, we use. That's one reason why I'm super excited about this conversation today. I am using generative AI, Microsoft Copilot. People in my organization are, but not enough of us are. And we have to continue to use these technologies ourselves so we can value-added resell those to you guys and help you guys with the solutions you need. Consulting services, we have a staff of people as well as a very closely coupled bench to us of people that have massive expertise in the spaces that we work in. Managed services, I mentioned a few minutes ago, and then one of my things I'm most excited about, we do complimentary assessments, everything you see at the bottom of the screen for sure, as well as a bunch of other things. We do not feel like you have to pay someone to come in and take a real valid engineering-minded look at your organization's use of certain technologies. Everyone you see on the screen here for sure, Citrix, VMware, Nutanix, Microsoft, IGL, ServiceNow, Salesforce. We want to come in and look at that stuff for you guys because we think that that is a massive way to show our commitment to a partnership. And we think it's a great opportunity to uncover things that we can do to help you guys. Is it a sales motion? Absolutely. Is it a sales motion with everybody's eyes wide open that we're here to help? Absolutely it is. And that's just part of the XenTegra model, which is overall, build a community of partners and customers, enable those partners and customers. That's all you have to do. XenTegra has 0 investors. We don't have to worry about, quarterly profits and reporting to Wall Street or reporting to private equity to figure out when they're going to get their money back. This is what we do because this is how we think businesses should be run. And that is creating this true partnership enablement between customers and vendors with great technologies that solve problems. This is my last slide here. It's a really good way for me to highlight some of the things we do, not limited to complimentary assessments. I mentioned that a minute ago. Please, please, please take us up on one of those options. We are just going to pull back the covers, take a look, give you our thoughts on things. Won't cost you a dime. And if you see value in us, it's a great opportunity to work together going forward. XenTegra webinars and podcasts, we do those all the time. Workshops, free education workshops. That's how we got the business started. Vendor-focused podcast I mentioned a minute ago. I was literally just posting an IGL podcast. In fact, it's still on the screen over here. I never get it done. That's going to happen here in a little bit. And then one thing I'm super proud of, and I don't get enough people taking advantage of, all these conferences out there, whether it's RSA, IGL Disrupt, Nutanix.next, VMware, Explore, ServiceNow Knowledge. We have all these passes that we want to sell at 90% off, can be 100% off, could be free. You tell us if you need it that way, but we try to, some buy-in, some skin in the game. As a former systems administrator, I used to love the idea of going to conferences. I never could do it. We put that out there to try to help people. So by default, discounting 90% off whatever the conference pass is. If you're interested in going to a conference and you're working with us or going to work with us at some point, want to work with us, let us know, because it's just a great opportunity for you to get educated and become a better customer for us. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Josh. And Josh, you there?
Yep. Thanks, Andy.
And I'm sorry, are you sharing your screen? You probably are.
I am, yes. Hope everyone sees it. And it was a seamless transition.
I'll double check here in a second, but as we talked about, I want to transition to you by telling this story. I really didn't get the whole madness around this AI thing until I was sitting in a ServiceNow conference a year ago now, and they stopped for a second and they stopped talking about AI, which to some degree has been around a long time, not just in the movies, but in reality. And they started talking around generative AI, which is what Microsoft Copilot is. And when they started talking about, it's not about having the data and the information, it's about doing something with it. That's when my whole world changed, whether it's, sending an email, whether it's posting on LinkedIn, whether it's, data within Salesforce telling me, hey, you're not paying enough attention to this opportunity, this customer, whether it's my daughter, typing a professional email about internship this summer and her sending it to her mom and me saying, hey, you should run this through AI first. And she goes, well, Dad, I'm 21 years old. Of course I already did that. It's like all these things just start to make it all make sense for me. So Josh, with that, I'm going to hand it
Thanks.
over to you to kind of talk
Yeah,
through
thanks.
the agenda for today.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Josh Busateri. As Andy mentioned, I'm a modern workplace solution architect here at XenTegra. I've actually worked in the Microsoft 365 space for a while now, over a decade probably. Actually going back to the days of BPOS. And if you remember BPOS, I'm sorry I brought that up. But hey, look, we're talking about AI now, so pretty crazy. Anyway, I'm really excited to talk about Copilot today. Just want to give a quick agenda. First, we'll look at what Copilot is at a very high level. I'll show you a couple of nice use cases for how it can assist in tasks throughout your workday. We'll go through how to enable Copilot, and then we'll talk about some important considerations to take and to think about before you actually enable it. So at this point, I think everyone's probably heard of Copilot a little bit or a lot, and you probably have some idea of what it does, but I'll just give a quick recap. So Copilot is Microsoft's AI power chat companion, and there's actually a few different modules of Copilot, including Copilot for Windows, which I think at this point is probably the most popular. It sits at your start menu as a search bar. It's kind of like a replacement of Cortana. And you probably saw a Super Bowl commercial about it. So that's probably why a lot of you have heard about it already. There's also Copilot for Sales, Copilot for Service, which interface with CRM systems. And then there's what we're all here to talk about, which is Copilot for Microsoft 365. And so Copilot for M365 takes the large language models used in other AIs like ChatGPT or Azure's OpenAI, which is actually what's used here. And it combines that with your tenant data that's all available through Microsoft's Graph. And so when prompts are given through Copilot, it uses both the large language model and your tenant data to provide its answers. So it makes it pretty unique there. This flowchart is something you may have seen before. It goes into a lot of detail of how Copilot actually works. I'm not going to spend any time really going into this, but you can always go back and look at this, and happy to go through this later on. It does get pretty technical, but I do want to talk and walk through some of the different modules inside of Copilot within a tenant. So you'll see on the top left, there's Word, Teams, PowerPoint, Excel, and Outlook. And so I wanted to just go through each of those and kind of show you what you can do in all of them.
Josh,
before I do that,
yep. One of the calls to action here. Oh, by the way, please ask questions in the chat window, guys. And I'll get those over to Josh. Hey, Josh, I guess one of the takeaways from this is we're going to want people to follow up with us and want to have deeper discussions. This particular workflow here that you have, you're going to go through it a little bit now, but highlight only a few things. This is something we would spend a ton of time making sure they understood if we had the opportunity to follow up with them, right?
Exactly. Yep, definitely. Yeah, I'm not going to really touch more on this here, but actually, Andy, a question for you. And you briefly mentioned this, but what are you most intrigued about Copilot, and how do you think it can help the business?
Well, let's start with how it's going to help me, and I think that applies to everybody in the business. And that is, there's not enough time in the day, right? There's not enough time in the day to do things well. I can't tell you how excited I am about this LinkedIn thing where I go to post something on LinkedIn, and there's a button over here that says, would you like AI to reword this and read and potentially make suggestions. The efficiencies to get more things done and to get things done better across the whole spectrum of everything I'm doing, specifically in this case, the Microsoft products and the things that can tie into the Microsoft products. That's what excites me about using this technology and getting the benefits of time back and helping me make fewer mistakes and doing things better. Now, take that and apply it across the spectrum of everybody in the company who I want to be doing the same thing simultaneously. We should have a better business result.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here too. I think that productivity and efficiency is something that we've been talking about in IT for a long time, and there's been gradual gains in different areas of IT and technology and different solutions that have come out. For me, this is a massive game changer in those two areas. There's a direct correlation between implementing something like this and every aspect of my job as the president of XenTegra, everything that I do. To Andy's point, I don't have enough time. I've far too many things to do. And so what happens to all of us in those situations is we don't get to everything. We drop the ball sometimes. And the things that we do get to, we don't do as well as we could otherwise. That's just the nature of the beast when you're that busy. And Copilot has the ability to directly impact each one of those, not only for myself, but everyone in my organization.
Jody, can you imagine a situation like, I know there's emails in my inbox right now that I should be looking at, but nobody's telling me.
Yep.
Imagine if something not only said, hey, there's this email here, and I think this is what you want to say back to them. You go with that, hit send, boom, done.
Yep, exactly. And that's a real world example. It can absolutely do that. It can help you, and we'll get into examples. We could go all day like this. I'll just stop, hand back to Josh.
Yeah, that's a great segue. Let's look at some examples of how you can actually use it in your day-to-day work life. So look at PowerPoint first. And so actually, before we get into that, let me take a step back here. When you turn on Copilot for a user, there's actually this Copilot button that comes up in pretty much every application. You see it everywhere. And so when you click the button, it brings up a side chat where you can start giving it prompts to do things. Copilot also shows up in other places, like inside of documents or emails, highlight text, things like that. And we'll show you some examples there too. But let's say you're in PowerPoint, you click the button, the Copilot button, the chat pops up, and you could ask it to pretty much do anything. Copilot will give you some prompts it thinks you may want to do, depending on if it's a new file or if there's text in the file. It may recommend different prompts. So in this example here, it was a blank PowerPoint file. Copilot was prompted to create a presentation based on an existing Word document. So this is a pretty cool example of how powerful Copilot can be. You can call different components from your tenant, like or email, to craft something that you need. So you can see here, it actually even shows a design, which you can adjust or regenerate. And so our presentation was created in PowerPoint. So you may be asking yourself, well, wait, did you use Copilot for this? And the answer is no, I didn't. But I did feed Copilot our agenda to see what would it look like. And this is what it came up with. And it is very basic. You can see the prompt on the side. I basically just fed it the agenda word for word. But if I also had it call on a blog entry, let's say we had about Copilot, to get more content, this could have been we could have probably wrote this whole thing in Copilot, which is pretty crazy.
Hey, Josh, on that note, so you said it was somewhat basic, but it was valuable, and what it tried to bring into the equation for you. Do me a favor, predict the future 5 years from now. How much better does it get it?
Even in 6 months, I think. I mean, if I put a little more time into working the prompt, we probably could have had this whole presentation done in Copilot.
Well, and that's another good
very
thing.
Powerful.
It's getting better, and you will get better, and you will get better at prompting it too.
Exactly. Yeah. And remember, this came out 4 months ago, right? So it's all very new. AI in general is very new. So we're all figuring out what the best way to prompt is. That's the key, I think, is working on how we prompt it to get the answers that we need.
Right.
So let's look at Word. Same thing in Word. There's a button where the Copilot chat can pop out. In this example here, this is actually existing text that when you highlight, you see a little Copilot button next to the highlighted text. And you have two main prompts based on that. You can ask it to rewrite what you've written, or you can visualize it as a table if there's any data in there. And you'll see both those examples here of a rewritten paragraph and text to table. At the bottom, there was a prompt given to draft a proposal from meeting notes in OneNote using product offers from a Word document. So again, another example of how you can pull from multiple data sources within your tenant. And then we'll move on to Excel. So Excel is also very powerful. You can use Copilot to analyze data sets without writing a single line of code. And so if you've always wanted to use Excel formulas or pivot tables, never knew how to do it, you could just ask Copilot to do it, and it will spit out the results. In the example here, there's a bunch of data, and Copilot was asked to analyze it and then create a new sheet with a new graph based on its results. So you can get pretty in depth here with sales results, right? Things like that. It's pretty cool.
So Josh, you're saying that all those magical formula creating programming people within Excel, a lot of that can be duplicated with the power of Microsoft Copilot.
Exactly. We could all be coders. So I like Outlook's features a lot, actually. I've used this, one of the most uses for me when using Copilot. And just a note here that you actually need the new version of Outlook for Copilot, so it will not work in the old version. And so here's a scenario. I think Andy, you brought this up. You know, you have a lot of emails in your inbox. Let's say that there was a long back and forth conversation with people in email. You are not on this chain, but someone decided to add you. Either they forwarded it to you or they mentioned you to bring you into it. Instead of scrolling through that whole conversation, you can actually use Copilot to summarize it for you, get you up to speed, give you the bullet points, action items, things like that, save you time, you know, even just a few minutes here and there to save you time from having to read the whole thing. In this example here, actually, Copilot was used to help draft a new email. You could also use it similar to Word, where you can rewrite text, and you could actually choose different tones. If you don't like the tone, there's direct, neutral, casual, formal, make it a poem. So, you know, you can really change what you're trying to write. So yeah, we've gone through a couple of examples here. Jody, what's a good feature you've found so far? You've used Copilot for a bit now, right? What have you what have you liked out of it so far?
Yeah, so the list is quite long, actually. I think the biggest impact to me on a day-to-day basis is, and I'll give you an example, is the Teams recap. But I'll give you a very specific example. Last week, I was actually traveling, and I've only been using, transparently, I've only been using Copilot for about 3 weeks now. And last week, I was on the road all week. My plane landed in the airport about 30 minutes later than it was supposed to, which meant I was 20 minutes late to an exec call that I was supposed to be on. So as soon as the plane landed, turned on my phone, logged into Teams, and Teams instantly asked me, as it was adding me to the call, it asked me if I wanted a recap of the discussion so far. Well, I thought that was fantastic. So I said yes. It gave me a short bulleted list of the recap. So, and I had read those 4 bullets by the time that the rest of the exec team recognized that I was now in the call. And they said, "Oh, thanks. Welcome, Jody. You know, do you need a quick recap?" And I said, "Well, let me give you what Copilot just gave me. Let's test this." And it was spot on. So huge advantage just coming late into a meeting. But on a day-to-day basis, I've been using it consistently to recap a meeting and provide action items. I am checking that still. I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks, but so far it comes out with about 99% accuracy and about 99% of the important content and the context. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by context. In a recap that I did, or an internal team meeting that got a little bit interesting between a few different parties, they were having I'll call it a lively debate. Copilot not only captured the content of the debate and ultimately what the decision was, but it actually reported on the fact that it was a lively debate with a lot of passion. So it gives you some really important context. It's really, really powerful.
Hey, Josh, there's 2 questions, one in the chat and one in the Q&A area. Guys, ask it in the Q&A just so I can keep track of all the different pieces, but I'll use the one out of the chat first. And this may not be the appropriate time. I know you have a whole section on security here in a little bit, but it's specifically asked, and this is from a proactive generative AI perspective, where do you see Copilot's ability to help, say, a systems admin with vulnerabilities that they may or may not be looking for, or may not know about, or may not be aware of? Do you have an example where Copilot might be able to help a sysadmin?
That's a good question. I actually haven't seen much around that yet, and I don't know if that's a feature that may be coming or maybe is out there that I just haven't seen yet. But yeah,
I could think of one. I mean, just log files. If you've got to search through a log file as a sysadmin, right? Just point Copilot at that and look for specific events or high risk events or a specific specific item.
There's no way the SIMs of the world and the log aggregators of the world won't have AI, you know, telling you, hey, you haven't done anything to recognize that there's an outbreak going on. There's a CVE been released. I don't see you patching. I don't see you doing anything to address this. That's a no-brainer for systems integrations tools. There's a part two. The second part is and best practices for secure integration with sensitive data. For example, that Teams thing, like we turned it off in the very beginning until we kind of validated whether it made sense to have this thing listening in on our Teams meetings. I'm not that is sensitive data, but is that part of what you're going to cover in a little bit, Josh?
It is, yeah. Let's table that for now. Yeah, we'll definitely cover security. Yep.
And then one other question that weave in and out of your conversations here: does Copilot work better with 365 or Office 2019? I think the cloud versus on-prem conversation. If you're going to cover that later too, that's fine. But is using cloud-based systems going to massively enable Copilot, whereas the legacy on-prem systems will not?
Yeah, we'll cover that too in a minute. But yeah, you do need to use the M365 apps version of Office. Otherwise, yeah, you're limited to the web. The results would be the same in either scenario. So it's really just, what users are used to using.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's keep going and we'll come back to
great questions.
I'll go back
Yeah. So Jody, actually, you stole my favorite use case for Copilot so far as well. And I've talked to a lot of people who've used Copilot over the past couple months, and they all say Teams meetings are their favorite feature so far. I think because it's probably just so easy to use. So just want to give you a little bit more detail around how it works, because it is very, very cool. So there's really two main ways to use Copilot for Teams meetings specifically. And it's either during a meeting, like Jody had mentioned, or using it after the meeting is over. So on the left, you'll see some prompts about when you're inside of a meeting. Let's say you come 10 minutes late, like Jody said, right? Copilot pops up, asks if you want to recap, gives bulleted updates, to get you up to speed. And then on the right, these are examples of using Copilot after the meeting's over. So let's say you missed a meeting entirely or just didn't take good notes. Copilot can just easily summarize the entire meeting, list action items. It even offers follow-up questions that you can then go ask the presenters. And so I'll add here that all of this only works if the meeting is recorded or transcribed. Obviously, it needs the transcription to pull all the data from. And so when Copilot will respond with its transcription content, it bolds who the speakers were, and it uses names because it knows who's speaking, right? So if you see on the left, it says Serena and Beth plan to have a follow-up, right? It knows who is talking and who action items may have belonged to, or who made the comments, things like that. And I'll also add in all of these scenarios, you'll see little footnote numbers next to each sentence. And so Copilot will actually refer back to the specific lines that it's referencing, or specific Word documents it found, so you know where it's pulling the data from, and you could always go back and double check, which is pretty nice. And there's one more feature that I had learned about recently, and I haven't gotten to use it yet. But if you know in advance that you're going to miss a meeting, you can open the invite in Outlook and press a new button there called Follow, which lets you follow the meeting. Once that meeting starts, the organizer will then receive a pop-up that people are following the meeting and suggest that it be recorded or transcribed, so that it knows that you want to then use Copilot later on to have a recap and things like that. So that's pretty cool, kind of a start to finish of, you're missing the meeting. Then without saying anything, Copilot will let the presenter know that, hey, you should record this meeting, so that people can then follow up. So this all sounds great. So you may be asking, well, how do I start using it? And it's actually pretty simple. It's licensed per user. You need a minimum license of either Business Standard or Premium, an Office 365 E3 or E5, or a Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. And as going back to that question, you would need M365 apps installed to use the Copilot feature within the applications. Otherwise, you'd just be limited to using it on the web. And it can actually just be turned on for one user if you want. So it's not necessary to license the whole tenant. It's a per user license. And I'll get into that more in a minute as well. It's also recommended to be turned on for users that use multiple data points. So things like email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, right? The more data that exists, the better Copilot will perform, and the better you'll be able to use Copilot to do what you want it to do. One other tip I mentioned earlier, Outlook needs to be on the new version. Teams does not need to be on the new version. It actually works both in the old and new versions. So hopefully this all sounds like great news to you. I'm sure you're getting ready to hit the apply button and assign those licenses, but just want to hold on a few more minutes because we're going to talk about some of the security concerns. And Jody, I have a question for you, and actually everyone, you could think about the answer as well. But what do you think is the most common first question someone asks when they get access to Copilot?
Maybe, how do I create a funny meme? That's,
It
I
could
would
be up
think
there.
yeah, right. I would guess it's probably something around salary information, like what is my peer, how much is my peer John Smith making?
Yeah, actually, you're on the right track there. And I've heard this from multiple sources that the first question people ask is, what is the CEO's salary? So hearing that and thinking about that, what are some risks you see that may be associated with Copilot?
Yeah, look, the way that Copilot has an incredible amount of power. There are significant risks, though, just like with anything else. And I think the easiest way to articulate it, I found, is that over the last 20 years, I was a CIO for a decade, and we've known in IT for 20 plus years that we really need to get a better handle on data governance. Typically, in a lot of, not everywhere, but in a lot of organizations, the budget and the drive from the top down in an organization really hasn't been there to do that, except from a compliance perspective. So compliancy has often taken the approach of tick the boxes, do the minimum to meet the compliance standards that we're required to from a regulatory perspective. But not a whole lot of organizations have taken a real holistic approach at data governance and security. So the easiest way to describe it is, what that means is, in the past and currently, if a user has access to something that they shouldn't have access to, that could be a file, that could be a share, multiple shares, multiple files, the only real way, outside of a nefarious user, the only real way for a normal user to know that is to go looking for it and to find it themselves. And that risk is relatively low. Now, if you have access to it, whether you should or not, Copilot sees it, and Copilot will use it, and will return results based on that. So there's an internal risk to an organization around all the things. As the president of my organization, there are things that are confidential that if I don't save in the right place, people could have access to that. That's very important from an internal perspective. For some organizations, most organizations, but especially some industries, the risk of losing and leakage of intellectual property is a game changer and a business killer. So the risks are real, and now is the catalyst to finally get proper data governance in place and proper security in place.
Yeah, guys, just based on what's coming in the chat window in the Q&A, which, by the way, guys, use Q&A if you can. That's the only way I can possibly keep up, but that's where everybody's questions are going. Does it understand, biasness? Does it understand, intellectual property and things that shouldn't be shared? Jody, your comment's straightforward, right? If it happened, if it's there, it's there. If you have access to it, it's there. That all the more reason to be on top of the security aspects of this.
Yeah, and I saw the question around bias. I'll address just real high level, and before I hand back to Josh. And I think bias in healthcare, bias in anything. I think to what Andy's point, Copilot is going to look at everything as fact. Microsoft has made a commitment to managing that effectively and making sure that their priority is such as gender affirming and minimizing bias and doing all those things. That's Microsoft's commitment. But the reality is, this is a technology, and that is going to have to improve over time. So the rule of thumb with Copilot today is absolutely take advantage of it where you can, get the benefits, but review it. Don't trust it. And it goes beyond just trusting that. If you were to outsource your job to Copilot, you lose the context of how to do your job, and you lose the human touch. There's all kinds of reasons not to do that. But the rule of thumb is, let it do recaps for you, let it do what it can do, and then review it. So spend your time reviewing rather than writing, spend your time reviewing rather than creating.
So, Jody, to just paraphrase what you're saying, right? Take advantage of what it can do, but don't just let it do it without any governance.
Yep.
And you come from a healthcare background. There's several people on the questions asking about healthcare related things. Obviously, it's going to be a massive concern in healthcare. All the more reason to get in front of it, have these follow-up conversations with your background and others. But
absolutely,
so I'm envisioning the idea we have to have this enabled organization that everybody's a prompt engineer. At the same time, we need somebody going back and looking at the prompts to figure out what was asked and what was looked for, and what did it find.
Yep. Yeah, and Josh is probably going to get into this, but there's a concept that has a direct impact on what Copilot will deliver, and that's this concept of rot and rot data, and that's redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. It's a problem in every organization. So not only do you have to be concerned about what access it has, but you also need to be concerned of what it's looking at. In my business, we deliver professional services all the time and managed services, right? I don't want Copilot looking at a statement of work that's 10 years old to use it as an example of how to develop a new statement of work. Do I want Copilot, and can Copilot help me develop a statement of work currently? Absolutely. And I want to use it that way, but I've got to be really careful the data sources that it's using to pull that and create that from.
All right, Josh.
Yeah.
We're burning
all
through
great points. Yeah,
have a lot more to cover.
Yeah, you're hitting a lot of stuff we're going to cover. Yeah, this is great. So just I want to take first at a high level approach of some security considerations, and then we'll kind of get into those more details here. But this graphic was actually pulled straight from Microsoft, and really the only thing that I do want to highlight here is the comment at the bottom that users will only be able to search the information that they already have access to. And just think about that for a second, because there's a really, really big assumption there that users only have access to data they have access to and that they should have access to. And so if you're a tenant administrator around here, you may think that users only have access to their own data, but that's where Copilot introduces this whole new level of complexity, right, when it comes to data governance. And I'll give you a quick example, and this may apply to more smaller tenants, or maybe smaller tenants that started small, right, and then grew. So did you know that by default, when creating a new tenant, there's a new SharePoint site and a new team created with all members automatically granted access, just by default, right? And I've had customers that don't want to touch this team or site because they think that it's somehow tied to the root of SharePoint or Teams, right? And deleting it may break it, things like that. Just a side note, it can be deleted. But what this means is when new users come in to the tenant, they're automatically added as full members to this site or this team, right? So let's say you just turned on a new tenant, you're starting to bring some data over. Someone sees this site or this team and they think, hey, this is a great place to store public HR data, right? Like the code of conduct, leave policies, benefit information, things like that. Usually people put those in global sites. It's pretty common. But fast forward a few months later now, the company grows, there's new HR staff. Someone sees this nice HR folder and they say, hey, I'm going to create a subfolder called personnel and store PII data, maybe social security numbers, maybe salary, maybe confidential performance review notes, things like that, right? And like Jody, you mentioned, no user would know that they have access to this data unless they actually dug around and looked for it. I think it's really hard in SharePoint to actually find something if you don't have the link for it directly, right? So people may have access to a ton of data, but they don't know that they have access, and they probably never figure out how to access it until now, right? Because Copilot will find it. And it knows that you have access to that data, and it would return those results in its prompts. So going back to that first question about the CEO's salary, right? Users may not know they have access to this data, but if you ask Copilot, it will return a real result if you actually do have access. Another quick example I actually came across recently, I was looking at some suggested prompts for Copilot, and one of the first ones is, it says, hey, give me a recap or show me the latest about this colleague. And you can put any colleague you want in there. And imagine if that returned performance review comments that other people made, right? If that data is not locked down, that is 100% possible. So the next question that it sounds like you all have is how do I ensure this doesn't happen, right? How do I make sure users only have access to the data that they should? And that's something that we call just enough access. And there are several built-in ways inside the tenant that you've probably heard of, you may be using, you may not be using, but they can be used to ensure that the data is secure. And we'll take a look at that right now. So I'll talk through a couple of examples here that you can use to get your tenant ready for Copilot. And the goal with all of this is to prevent oversharing and to ensure that your users really only have access to the data that they should, right? So most of this, again, will probably look familiar. A lot of these functionalities are topics that maybe you dismissed in the past. I think these were all considered like advanced features, right? Maybe you thought, oh, my tenant doesn't need data classification and labeling enabled, right? Our data is in good shape. You know, you never maybe had a good use case or business case for getting these deployed. Other things like information protection, labeling through Microsoft Purview. There's DLP, data loss prevention policies to protect your PII data. You can use labeling to decide who has access to certain data when the label's applied, or whether data could be shared at all internally or externally. So these are all great ways to make sure your data is protected. And Copilot will see all of this information, right? They'll see all of these policies and abide by them. So if a label gets applied that prevents someone from accessing that data, Copilot will not return that data back because the user does not have access. It's also important to look at your existing SharePoint sharing settings, things like access control policies, you know, making sure no one is a member of a site that they shouldn't be. You know, something like a detailed taxonomy for categorizing and organizing data, I think is also pretty important. For example, keeping finance data in the finance site and only making sure the finance team has access. That's a pretty easy example right there. And so I can't stress enough that you have to make sure that your house is in order, as some say, before enabling Copilot. I think that's one of the key points here. And even if you enable it, just
Sorry, Josh, I was going to say there's a question that relates to what you're talking about here. Evan asked, will Copilot need high-level rights within the environment to function? I'm getting, and this is great for me, I guess I didn't realize this, the Copilot doesn't have any rights. It's the individual prompting Copilot's rights that'll need to be granted.
Exactly.
Or are there additional rights Copilot itself, the service needs?
There are none. You turn Copilot on for user and that's away you go. That's it. Yeah, so this is why this is so important. It all comes down to the user's rights. There's no other Copilot configuration settings really, right? You turn it on and it does its thing immediately. So yeah,
I guess
that's a good question.
This really just came to me, and this is a stupid, simple way to say this, but whatever the user could have done at the prompt, AKA the command line, the PowerShell command prompt, that's the same rights Copilot has.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything a user has at least view access to will be seen by Copilot for that user. Yep.
So if you can type in cat and make it come up, then you can make Copilot go look at it and tell you something about it.
Yep.
How crazy is that? Also powerful at the same time. Yeah.
Very, very, very powerful. Yep. Yeah. And then one other topic here I wanted to talk about, and Jody actually mentioned this as well, is not only securing your data, but looking at the data itself. And like Jody mentioned, Copilot won't distinguish between data created, let's say 10 years ago versus something that was created last week, right? So if there are old documents that may contain outdated information, Copilot could then just return results that are just not right. They're factually wrong. So it's always good to validate, right, any Copilot output or any AI output for that matter. Copilot does always provide its sources at least, right? So you can always go back and see where it got the data. You can always kind of follow that trail back to fix it if you need to. But definitely best practice is to clean up old data, archive or purge data, train staff on good data hygiene, you know, not keeping multiple copies of this or different versions of the same file, for example, and then just purging old obsolete data, I think is a good point there. So I think if you have to take one thing away from this slide, it's that people probably have access to more than you think, and the time to find that out is definitely now, before you turn on Copilot and not after.
Well, but here's the thing, right? So if I think if you wait for that moment where you feel totally protected, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, it's you know, after you look at all of these things, right? And even if you think all of this is in order, I wouldn't say turn it on for everybody. I think that's a good way to kind of slow roll into Copilot, right? Assign it to different people. We're doing this internally as well inside XenTegra. We have different waves, I think, and we don't have it rolled out to the whole environment yet. It's only for a pilot and maybe a few others. So definitely recommend a slow enablement just to make sure. And Microsoft actually did the same thing. I think they chose like 20 organizations at first to roll it out to, and then kind of expanded from there.
Yeah, part of our readiness assessments and recommendations kind of break it down that way. So you don't have to go A to Z in order to deploy Copilot. There are things that you need to do, and we'll help organizations define what are the highest output roles. Where are you going to get the biggest bang for the buck? It's these types of roles, and your organization will help you identify those. And then we'll look at the risks associated with those. And we might recommend Depending on the size of the organization, the amount of data, and the amount of raw data that exists, we might recommend a sort of fast track approach in which we segment different aspects of data and get different roles and personas started. In smaller organizations that don't have as much data, it might be much more of a fast track across the board where we can segment data in while we're helping get the right information architecture in place and data governance in place. But to your point, Andy, yeah, I don't think anybody, and particularly executives, aren't typically going to accept, yeah, do all this work for the next 18 to 24 months, and then we can use Copilot. It doesn't work that way, as we all know.
And I think that's the main reason why we want to get in front of this group as XenTegra and Insentra to point out, you should not be doing this alone. It is not a trivial task. You need to phone a friend and get some help on doing this one.
That's right.
And if you do it wrong today, your company's going to have negative implications for years and years to come if you do it wrong today.
Yeah, and if you don't understand the data governance that's in place, potentially significant consequences.
Yeah, I have one comment to make on this. How many of us have been on using a computer or something, got a file, didn't know what file format it was, tried to open it up with some application we thought would be the best for it. We couldn't read it, so we just moved on. Imagine a world where this thing doesn't have that problem. It'll figure out what the format is and open it and be able to do something with it. Whereas the human is limited to our knowledge of, what a file type extension is or what the code looks like to be able to understand what to do with it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, Jody, you mentioned readiness assessments. So if you want to take it away from there and give some more details around that.
Yeah, so we in Insentra and XenTegra, we offer a Copilot readiness assessment. Before that, what we highly recommend for all customers is, and we offer a free power hour. Excuse me, your XenTegra rep will provide you the brochure of what I'm talking about here shortly. But there's 3 different power hours that you can choose from. We deliver one of those of your choice, and they're based on sort of what your organization's knowledge is of AI. So for instance, one of those power hours is a bit like this. What's the high level? What is Copilot, right? What is AI and what is Copilot? For other organizations that get that part and are more concerned about the risk and more concerned and focused on developing the appropriate strategy and roadmap, then we can go a little bit deeper in that power hour. But those power hours are, number 1, no cost to you, and 2, designed to help you figure out what is the best next step. Typically, that's got to be a Copilot readiness assessment, and there's different flavors depending on where you're at. We'll help you figure that out. But ultimately, a readiness assessment to assess all of those aspects that you can see there on the bottom right of the slide: security and privacy assurance, strategic licensing insights, enhanced productivity. So where can you get the biggest bang for the buck? We'll help you define a roadmap, and data governance and security being number 1. And this goes back to what I was talking a minute ago. No, not one size fits all. Some may be a fast track, depending on your situation. Others may be a slow rollout. Just depends on what you want to accomplish, your propensity for risk, and the existing situation around your data governance and security. So that's what we offer. That's the best way to get started, and it helps everyone, including those within your organization and your executives, really understand what's possible and what the risks are so that they can make the appropriate risk decisions.
Jody, you've mentioned the word fast track a couple of times. There is the fast track program for M365, which hopefully everybody on this call is working with XenTegra and Insentra on. If you're not, you're missing an opportunity to take advantage of funds that you are paying Microsoft. Microsoft is using to fund a fast track partner that may not be engaging you. That's a no-brainer. Does Copilot fall in that traditional fast track bucket or not?
It does. It does. So for any users that have more than 150 O or M365 E3 licenses, you are entitled to Microsoft Fast Track. If you don't know what that is, talk to your XenTegra rep, and we can get you under our queue. And it's essentially free help in adopting different workloads within the 365 stack. Copilot is part of that for some partners, not all. We are part of a select group, and Insentra is part of a select group of fast track partners that have been enabled by Microsoft for early Copilot jumpstart capabilities. So there are, in addition to the power hours that we offer, in addition to the readiness assessments that we offer, there are funds available from Microsoft for certain situations, and we can help you determine if you fit into those situations. where they'll help fund an organization to actually get started down this path.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big bet for everybody involved. And Microsoft sees the value in fast track partners getting people going in the right direction, because that's when the biggest use of it's going to happen. And let's be totally honest, for me, it's, we've had the operating system Windows, we've had the Microsoft Office suite of things, we've got things like Dynamics and other things that Microsoft really has added a ton of value in the business and is long-term sticky in your business. This is the next big one, and this to me is the one that ties it all together to where Microsoft customers become very impacted by Microsoft's ability to help and add value, and to be frank, stickiness long term. Microsoft wants you to do this, wants you to get it right, because it's good business for them as well.
Absolutely.
And we want you to get it right, because if you're gonna get stuck in it, you are. Let's get the most out of it. Jody, Josh, I think we've covered what we're supposed to cover. Let me just kind of run through the questions that are in here already and encourage people to ask more. I'm just going to go from top to the bottom. What reporting is available in Copilot usage? For example, what do organizations get notified or see in terms of Copilot usage? I made the comment a while ago that you've got to teach everybody in your company to be a prompt engineer, or find a prompt engineer friend to help you along the way and teach you. What about that? I guess we can use AI to look at the what's being generated as well. But at some point, what do customers get to see in terms of how people are using Copilot in their organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I was actually looking for an answer for that recently. I do not have our admin access to Copilot, but I do know that you see usage stats just in terms of who's used it, but you would never see actual prompts, right? That's between the user and their computer, basically. So you don't know, what they're asking and things like that, but you would know just usage statistics. So, are they using it? And you could track, if they've stopped using it, or, which modules they're using, things like that.
It seems to me that if I'm a company and somebody's using my Copilot to ask questions, I should be able to see what questions they're asking. Maybe that's a whole nother slippery slope, but I'm sure we'll come to that at some point.
Yeah,
that's definitely part of the security. Yeah.
Yep, and we're getting ready to roll out a 365 insight and management platform that will give some of those insights into Copilot. It is a rapidly changing landscape within Microsoft, and I'll just give you one example on the pure sales side. Up until 4 weeks ago now, every Microsoft partner expected the minimum of 300 Copilot licenses, which was in place until 4 weeks ago. We expected that minimum to be in place through the end of June. And 4 weeks ago, they surprised the world by saying, okay, we've eliminated that. So now everybody can buy Copilot. There's no minimum license. And I just use that as an example of how quickly things are changing. The same is on the technology side and the policy side and the reporting side. Rapidly changing landscape.
Yes, but at the same time, you can't afford to sit on the sidelines. I don't think on this one.
Correct.
Steve asked, what are the ethical considerations for using AI in healthcare? I think we kind of addressed that. And how does Copilot address them? I think the ethical stuff is what the ethical stuff has always been. Now you're just more powerful in terms of using it and getting more out of it, as well as exploiting it. It just comes down to the need to have these conversations ahead of time around getting your shop in order around what people have access to. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. AI doesn't change anything that we've had the ability to do. It just gives us the ability to actually do things we didn't have the time or capability to do.
Another question here is, if Copilot is capable of transcribing meetings and identifying speakers, are there safeguards in place to prevent true or use of unauthorized monitoring and preventing whistleblower actions against individuals? I just have to think, Jody, you've been on a bunch of meetings with me. AI is probably sitting there, this guy's super passive aggressive. I think that is a potential concern, that people are going to be able to be, HR is going to be able to come back and figure out who's not playing nice in meetings and things. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, look, I think this is one of those things that we know a whole lot less. How do I say this? What we don't know far outpaces what we do know about AI today and what it can and will become and what it can and will do. The U.S. government can't even agree on how to start the conversation around how to policy and regulate AI. So the U.S. government can't do a whole lot of things together. So maybe that's not today, but maybe that's not a great example. However, it just magnifies, it puts a magnifying glass on the magnitude of the situation. At the end of the day, this will be used nefariously. It will be used positively. It will increase productivity. It will probably destroy people's careers at some level. It will do all kinds of things that we can't possibly predict. And the reaction to that will be policies and laws, and we will form this over the next couple of decades. I think that pace is going to have to pick up, but I think it's no different than any other technology. It just has the power to put a magnifying glass on everything very, very quickly.
You know, Jody, as you're explaining this, I go back and think 30, 40 years ago when the personal computer hit the work environment, it did everything you just said, but it's taken time for that to happen. I think it's going to happen at a much more accelerated pace.
Yeah. I have people ask me all the time. One of the most common questions I get about AI in general is AI going to steal my job? And you know what my response has always been? Not always. What my response started being was, you know what? AI is probably not going to take your job. Someone using AI is probably going to take your job.
Yeah. Yep. A couple more questions in here. You and I, we could just chat here on the panel the whole time. Hopefully people like it and are listening. All right, there's a handful of new questions. Does Microsoft say what happens in your tenant stays in your tenant, or is all that info attributed to Microsoft's AI knowledge?
Nope. No, yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah, what happens in your tenant does stay in your tenant, and what happens with your user environment also stays there as well, right? So one of the reasons why you can't see other people's prompts and things like that. If you feed it information that's confidential, it doesn't use that information to then generate more prompts like ChatGPT, let's say, does. So it will stay within your tenant and within the bounds of your security settings.
Next question, with AI, do we get, with A5, I think that was intentionally A5. You guys can tell me, with A5, do we get the full Copilot, or what do we have to purchase?
Yeah, A3 and A5 as well, yeah, right, is a prerequisite.
It is a prerequisite. You don't get Copilot, it's a separate license.
Yeah.
Next question from Ron. Have you had to help any customers create a tailored value statement for executives to consider approving this for budget? If so, how was that measured? Effectively gains, time saved, et cetera?
Efficiency. That's a great question, Ron. The answer is no. We haven't had to do that yet. Haven't had any customers have to do that yet. And that's primarily because this is the first, probably 20 years for me. It's probably the first technology that's actually being driven more from the executive branch than the IT organization.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably worthy of a conversation, Jody. We meet with Ron and his executives and find out where their concerns are and see if they need that justification, help them with that if necessary. But in most cases, they're the ones trying to get the efficiency and the cost savings. Ron's a pretty forward-thinking guy. He may be having to lead his horses to water. We might have to go help him.
Yep, happy to.
Yeah. All right, most of the other questions here are related to things we've covered around ethics and security and privacy things. Let me scroll one more time through the questions. All right, we got some new ones. If you have a retention policy in place, where do we need to keep all the data for a certain period of time? Are those prompts and responses stored and able to access through an e-discovery?
That is a good question. And I've not looked into that yet, but that is something we can follow up on later.
So Evan, worth a follow-up conversation.
Yeah.
You have these e-discovery tools and all these repositories. How can you give or not give Copilot access to
that?
Would
Copilot see that? Yeah. I'm actually not sure. Yeah. It's a good question.
If it can't today, I'm sure it's being discussed.
Yeah, and I can hypothesize a little bit just from an e-discovery perspective. Whoever has e-discovery access to it is going to have access
Probably.
to it.
Yeah.
Most likely, but we can follow up with you, Evan, and get more specific about that. It's a good question.
Next question is it in Microsoft's roadmap to make Copilot available for the semi-annual enterprise channel of Microsoft 365 apps? I've read that it's only available in current and monthly enterprise.
Yes.
Our tenant is semi-annual.
Right. Yeah, it is only available there. And yeah, we can look at the roadmap and see. I haven't seen anything about that. We can definitely look into it.
Yeah, I haven't either. I think that falls into one of those categories that's changing rapidly. The only thing I've seen so far is they require a 12-month commit, regardless of where you're, how you're buying it. They require the 12-month commit, but that can change.
I'm just waiting for the Microsoft. If it happens in your AI, it stays in your AI, like Las Vegas. Waiting for that T-shirt.
Next Super Bowl.
maybe we should invent that T-shirt. All right. I think we've covered it all, guys. There's opportunity to follow up. Laura, reach out to your XenTegra contact. Love the opportunity to get Jody and his team in front of you guys. You're gonna need help. You should get help. We want to help you. We're coming at it from the right way through education, knowledge, connections. Let's get engaged. Josh, anything else from your side?
No, thank you all for your time. Yeah, this is great.
Jody, anything else?
I think you said it well, Andy. Thanks. I really appreciate everybody's time here. Look forward to working with many of you. Would love to help you down this journey, but definitely get some help from somebody. You need it.
And I think there's an opportunity, a partner like XenTegra, to bring people together and have people talking to other people. That whole community thing that we like to try to be very pro about. I think this is going to be something that needs a whole lot of community.
Yep, I agree.
There are a couple more questions. There are a couple more questions, which is great. Larry asked, will there be plugins for other apps, not only Microsoft apps?
Yeah, that's probably another good roadmap question. I haven't seen anything around that, but I imagine there would be. Yeah, I know they recently just announced tie-ins to like Salesforce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is yes, and it'll have to be with Microsoft related partners. I'm sure will be first in line for that. It has, like, let's say you're in Salesforce, you type in an email and you want to use the Microsoft AI as part of that, tied into your M365 Exchange hosted stuff. Makes complete sense that they would integrate those.
Yep.
Follow up on the value proposition question. Is that something that you can produce? How many of us will find extremely helpful to get executive leadership on board? It sounds like, guys, Jody, you're dealing with people now that are on board because they're coming to you looking for help.
Yeah.
There may be a whole nother group out there that needs help getting the executives to want to move forward.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And that person you're logged in as anonymous, so would love to find out who you are, and we can absolutely have a conversation. Anybody that's interested in that, please put a note in and we can absolutely share that. But I think that goes to Andy's point about the community. We as we all learn here together, some people are going to be driven by their exec teams. Some other organizations are going to have to drive it up in order to help IT accomplish what needs to be accomplished, like always in IT, right? But those are two different flavors and two very different internal sales motions. So appreciate the question and would love to help you.
Yeah, there's probably an opportunity for a workshop, executive workshop, where you come in, we have lunch and we try to give them some guidance on what executives need to know and help answer their questions. And if it moves forward, great. If not, then we try.
Yep, great.
All right. Well, with that, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Please follow with us, XenTegra. Let us know what your questions are. Computers for Community, the nonprofit, the XenTegra family of companies. We'll get Jody and his team, who are probably doing as much, if not more, than these conversations with anybody on the planet, Great opportunity to try to help and get engaged. Jody, Josh, thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Make it a great day.